Part 1. Mary in the Village. In a peaceful and picturesque village nestled between rolling hills and lush meadows, there lived an elderly woman named Mary. She was known throughout the village not for wealth or possessions, but for a warm heart and generous spirit. With soft white hair, a gentle smile, and eyes that always sparkled with kindness, Mary had become a beloved figure to everyone who knew her. Despite living alone in a modest, ivy-covered cottage near the edge of the village, Mary never felt lonely. Each day neighbors would stop by, bringing her fresh bread, fruits, or warm soup, and in return, Mary would listen to their troubles, share her wisdom, and offer thoughtful advice. Children loved to visit her after school, sitting around her tiny kitchen table, where she told them stories and offered handmade sweets. Mary's home was simple: wooden walls, a small garden filled with herbs and daisies, and a creaky wooden chair by the fireplace where she loved to sit and knit. But what her house lacked in luxury, it made up for in warmth and love. People often said that Mary's cottage had something magical, a place where worries faded and hearts felt lighter. Although she had no family of her own, Mary had found a greater kind of family in her community. Her life, while quiet and humble, was filled with meaning. She measured happiness not by material riches, but by the bonds she shared with others. For Mary, joy came from giving more than receiving, and her days were full of small, beautiful moments. Part 2. A chilly morning and a mysterious discovery. One crisp autumn morning, as the first golden rays of sunlight pierced through the thinning branches of the trees, Mary wrapped herself in her thickest shawl and stepped outside. The air carried the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, and her breath formed little clouds as she walked down the narrow, winding path toward the nearby forest. It was the kind of morning that made the world feel fresh and alive, even if the cold nipped at her fingertips. Mary had decided to gather some firewood to prepare for the colder days ahead. She loved her walks in the forest. It was a quiet, serene place where birds chirped softly and the wind rustled gently through the leaves. The forest had always been a source of peace for her, a place where she could think and feel connected to nature. As she wandered deeper beneath the canopy of amber and crimson leaves, something unexpected caught her eye. A strange, rounded shape poking slightly out of the earth, hidden beneath a pile of leaves and moss. Curious, Mary knelt down, brushed away the debris with her gloved hands, and revealed what appeared to be an old, rusty pot. The metal was worn with age, and the lid was slightly ajar. With a mix of hesitation and excitement, she lifted the lid. Her eyes widened, and her heart skipped a beat. Inside the pot, beneath a thin layer of dust, sparkled dozens of gleaming gold coins. The morning light danced across their shiny surfaces, creating a golden glow that made Mary gasp in amazement. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched one of the coins. Never in her life had she seen such treasure. For a few moments, she simply stared, overwhelmed by the sight. Was this real? Was it a dream? The quiet forest around her seemed to hold its breath. Mary stood there, holding the lid, her heart pounding with a mix of wonder, disbelief, and a flood of sudden possibilities. Part 3. Dreams of a Different Life. Mary slowly sat down beside the mysterious pot, her thoughts racing. As the initial shock wore off, excitement bubbled up within her. For the first time in many years, she began to imagine a life completely different from the one she had always known. In her mind's eye, she saw herself living in a beautiful, grand house made of polished stone and dark wood, nestled at the top of a green hill overlooking the village. The house would have large windows that caught the morning light, a wide porch with rocking chairs, and flower beds filled with roses, tulips, and lavender. Inside, the rooms would be warm and bright. She imagined a soft velvet chair beside a magnificent fireplace where flames danced behind glass and gave off a steady, comforting heat. There would be thick rugs on the wooden floors, shelves full of books, and a big kitchen where she could bake all the bread and pies she had ever dreamed of making. No longer would she have to wait for neighbors to bring her food. She could provide for herself, and even invite them over for hearty meals. She also imagined having a helper, perhaps a kind young woman from the village, who would assist her with chores and share in her company. Together they would decorate the house for every season, tend to the garden and care for animals, a cat that curled up in front of the fire, maybe even a dog to accompany her walks in the forest. Mary's heart soared as her imagination expanded. The coins in the pot weren't just metal, they represented freedom, comfort, and the chance to live her remaining years in ease. No more worrying about repairs to her cottage, no more saving every penny, no more cold winters by a weak fire. She smiled to herself, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepening with joy. Life, it seemed, had just given her a miracle, and she was ready to embrace it. Part 4, the journey home begins. Mary knew she couldn't carry the heavy pot of gold in her arms. Though her spirit felt young and eager, her body reminded her of her age with every creak of her joints. Still, she was determined. She looked around and began to think. How could she move something so heavy by herself, through the forest, and all the way back to her little home? Her eyes fell upon a stack of fallen branches and old wooden planks nearby, left behind, perhaps, by other travelers or woodcutters. An idea sparked in her mind. She would make a makeshift slide, or sled, something sturdy enough to hold the pot and smooth enough to drag along the forest floor. With surprising energy, Mary got to work. She selected the strongest planks, cleaned them off, and arranged them side by side. She tied them together using some thick twine she always carried in her bag for gathering firewood. Then she found an old cloth sack, reinforced the bottom, and wrapped it tightly around the pot. Using more rope, she secured it firmly to the wooden base. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. With a deep breath, she gripped the ends of the ropes, planted her feet firmly, and began to pull. The sled creaked, the pot shifted slightly, but it moved. Inch by inch, Mary dragged the treasure through the trees, her boots crunching over dry leaves and twigs. The path home was longer than she remembered. The forest, once peaceful and comforting, now felt endless. Her arms ached, her back throbbed. Several times she had to stop and rest, wiping sweat from her brow despite the chill in the air. But each time she paused, she reminded herself, this is worth it. All of this will be worth it. Birds flew overhead, calling out in the pale blue sky. A squirrel paused on a branch to watch her. Mary, breathing hard, gave a little laugh and whispered, I bet you've never seen an old lady dragging a pot of gold, have you? The journey was difficult, but her heart was light with hope. Part 5. A surprising change. Gold turns to silver. After what felt like hours of dragging the heavy pot through uneven terrain and tangled roots, Mary paused to rest beneath a tall oak tree. Her hands were sore from gripping the ropes, and her legs trembled from exertion. She wiped her forehead with the edge of her shawl and let out a deep sigh, proud of how far she had come. Out of curiosity and perhaps a bit of reassurance, she lifted the lid of the pot to glance once more at her shining treasure. But what she saw made her freeze. The gold coins had changed. Gone was the warm glowing yellow. In its place was a pile of silver coins. Bright, yes, but colder in tone, and unmistakably not gold. For a long moment Mary simply stared. Her mind struggled to understand what had happened. Had her eyes deceived her in the forest light? Had she imagined the gold? She leaned closer, picked up one of the coins, and turned it over in her hand. It was undeniably silver. A sharp pang of disappointment cut through her chest. All the dreams she had imagined, the grand house, the luxurious warmth, the comforts, suddenly felt further away. She sat down slowly, her back resting against the oak tree, and stared up at the sky through the branches. But then she took a deep breath and reminded herself, silver is still valuable. Not as much as gold, but it's something. It's still a gift, still a miracle. She placed the coin back into the pot gently, almost as if offering it respect. After all, just that morning, she had no treasure at all. Nothing had been promised to her. And yet, here she was, with a pot full of silver. That was more than enough to improve her life, even if not in the grand way she had imagined. Mary smiled faintly. Life really went exactly as planned. She knew that better than most, but she still had hope. And hope, like silver, could shine in its own quiet, dignified way. With renewed determination, she stood up, tightened the ropes, and continued her journey home, dragging not gold but something still precious. Part 6. When silver turns to iron. The forest began to thin as Mary drew closer to the village. She recognized familiar trees, a large boulder where she once had a picnic with children from the village, and even the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys. Her heart lifted. She was almost home. She paused again for a short rest near a shallow creek. The sound of trickling water soothed her, and for a moment she forgot her aching muscles. With a sense of cautious optimism, she once more opened the lid of the pot. Her breath caught in her throat. The silver was gone. What remained inside was a pile of dull grey iron coins, heavier, less shiny, and far less valuable than either gold or silver. The sight of them made Mary's heart sink. She stared in disbelief, her lips parting but no words coming out. The light that had filled her eyes earlier in the day dimmed. She slumped down beside the pot, her shoulders sagging, her mind swirled with disappointment and confusion. What had started as a moment of wonder now felt like a cruel trick. Was this some kind of punishment? Had she been greedy to dream of more? Hairs pricked the corners of her eyes. She felt a sharp pang deep inside, of loss, of sadness, of hope slipping through her fingers. But as she sat in silence, listening to the quiet murmurs of the forest, something shifted within her. A memory surfaced of her cozy home, of laughter shared with neighbors, of warm bowls of soup placed lovingly on her doorstep. She thought of the smiles of children when she gave them sweets, the warmth of her old chair by the fire, and the joy she found in helping others. She had not found happiness in gold, nor would she lose it with iron. Mary took another deep breath and wiped her eyes. She looked at the pot, now heavy with iron, and whispered, "You may not be what I hoped for, but maybe this is exactly what I needed." With gentle care, she closed the lid and sat back for a few moments longer. The weight of the pot hadn't changed, but the burden on her heart had lightened. She no longer felt desperate to bring the treasure home. She felt something better, peace. Parzavena, a heart full of gratitude. Mary remained seated beneath the trees for quite some time, listening to the breeze whisper through the leaves and the distant call of birds overhead. As she looked at the forest around her, so quiet, so patient, she began to reflect deeply on the events of the day. What had started as a simple task, gathering wood for the winter, had turned into a journey through hope, desire, disappointment, and now realization. She thought back to that first moment she had seen the gold coins, how her heart had leapt with joy, how her mind had raced with dreams. Then came the silver, and she had tried to stay hopeful, and now even the silver was gone, replaced by iron, cold, plain, and humble. But as she sat in the silence, something beautiful stirred within her. A memory surfaced, not of riches or luxury, but of a quiet evening not long ago. She'd been sitting in her little chair by the fire, sipping warm tea. Outside, snow had begun to fall, gently, covering the village in a soft white blanket. Just then, a knock came at her door. It was a neighbor's daughter, holding a pie her mother baked, and behind her a boy with a bundle of firewood. They smiled, shivering slightly in the cold, and Mary had welcomed them in, warmed them by the fire, and listened to their stories. That memory, so simple and warm, filled her heart in a way no pile of gold ever could. Mary realized she had been happy before finding the pot, genuinely happy. Her life may have been simple, but it was rich in ways that mattered. Her neighbors cared for her not because she had wealth, but because she had love to give. And she, in turn, found joy in their laughter, their kindness, and the comfort of shared moments. And looking at the pot now, she no longer felt sorrow. Instead, she felt immense gratitude for her life, for the people in it, and for this unexpected reminder of what truly mattered. She stood up, dusted off her skirt, and gave the pot one final glance. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me what I almost forgot." Then, with steady steps, she turned away from the pot and began walking back home, lighter than she had felt all day. Part 8. Home, Hearth, and True Wealth. By the time Mary reached the edge of the forest, the sun had begun to dip below the hills, casting a golden hue across the village rooftops. The familiar sights of home welcomed her, children playing in the dusty lanes, chimneys puffing gentle smoke into the sky, and the faint sound of laughter drifting through the air. Her legs were tired, her hands sore, and her back aches for the long journey, but her heart was calm. No longer burdened by the weight of expectation, she moved freely, each step taking her closer to the life she had almost taken for granted. As she approached her little cottage, a neighbor waved from across the path. Another called out, "Evening, Mary. Cold out there, isn't it?" She smiled, nodded, and returned their greetings with genuine warmth. How lucky she was, she thought, to be part of a community that looked after one another. Inside her home, everything was just as she had left it. Her fireplace stood ready with a neat stack of wood beside it, and her old but comfortable chair waited patiently by the hearth. She lit the fire, and soon soft, orange flames danced in the grate, casting a gentle glow around the room. Mary wrapped herself in a thick quilt and sat down, listening to the comforting crackle of the fire. In her hand she held a cup of warm tea, steeped from herbs she had picked from her own garden. Outside, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, one by one. As she gazed into the fire, she felt something rise within her. Not excitement or longing, but contentment. A deep, steady kind of happiness. She needed nothing more than what she had at that very moment: warmth, peace, and the quiet knowledge that she was loved and not alone. The pot of gold, the silver, the iron, it had all been a test, perhaps, a reminder. And in the end, Mary had rediscovered something far more precious than coins. She had found clarity. She would continue to live as she always had, with kindness, humility, and a heart open to others. And she knew with unshakable certainty that she was rich in all the ways that truly mattered. Part 9, The Real Treasure, A Lesson Remembered. In the days and weeks that followed, life in the village continued as it always had. The seasons shifted, the wind grew colder, and Mary went about her routines, tending her small garden, chatting with neighbors, and welcoming children who stopped by for stories and sweets. But something inside her had changed. She no longer thought about gold or silver, or what she could have bought if the coins had remained. Instead, she cherished every warm conversation, every simple meal, every kind gesture shared between friends. Her appreciation for life's small blessings had deepened, and her smile, already gentle, now carried a quiet, glowing strength. Word of her discovery and her decision to leave the pot behind spread slowly among the villagers. Some were puzzled, others curious, but most were inspired. People began to see Mary not just as the kind old woman with wise advice, but as someone who had truly understood what happiness meant. She didn't give long speeches or try to teach lessons. She simply lived as she always had, with gratitude and grace. And in doing so, she reminded everyone around her of something deeply important, that true happiness is not something we find in treasure chests or possessions, but something we grow inside ourselves. It lives in laughter shared over tea, in hands held during hard times, in the warmth of a fire on a cold evening, and in the quiet courage to accept life as it is, with all its changes, imperfections, and fleeting moments of beauty. Mary had once dreamed of riches, but what she discovered was far more powerful: the richness of a contented heart. And from that day on, she remained cheerful in every situation, no matter what life brought her.